So think about a teacup falling off a table.
Right, and just shattering on the floor.
Exactly, shattering into 100 pieces. And for, 150 years, the absolute greatest minds in physics have relied on statistics to explain that.
Yeah, literally just the probability of disorder.
Right. They use probability to tell you why that teacup won't just, spontaneously fly back up and reassemble perfectly in your hand. But today, we're looking at a stack of theoretical blueprints that claim statistical probability has absolutely nothing to do with it.
Nothing at all, which is a huge shift.
It really is. What if time isn't just a passive dimension where things happen to break? What if it's an actual violent mechanical friction, like a literal gear system grinding the universe forward step by step?
It's the absolute definition of a conceptual earthquake in fundamental physics. The sources we are diving into today completely abandon the idea that time is just the background architecture of reality.
Right, they're tossing out the whole passive background idea.
Completely. They present a rigorous mathematical proof that time is an active, tangible, emergent torsion force.
So welcome to the deep dive. And for those of you listening, look, we know who you are. You're our expert audience. You're the ones who, don't flinch at the actual complexities of theoretical physics.
The ones who actually want to get into the math.
Exactly. You're here because you want to understand the mechanical nuts and bolts of reality, not just those watered-down, popularized summaries. So we've custom-tailored this conversation specifically for you today.
And we have a massive, incredibly dense stack of source material in front of us.
We really do. We've got theoretical physics papers, topological blueprints, and mathematical proofs translated from the SDMT consortium, plus some wild biological applications from a group called the Cerebrum Collaboration.
Yeah, and our mission today is really nothing less than a radical reconceptualization of time itself. We are going to explore how time is mathematically generated by fractal misalignment in a superfluid universe.
It sounds like sci-fi, but it's pure math.
It is. But to even begin to grasp this new model, we have to look back and understand the massive, somewhat embarrassing blind spot in classical physics.
Okay, let's unpack this, because it is kind of wild that we even need a new model for time, right? We have general relativity,
Right.
We have quantum mechanics, we have these insanely successful frameworks that predict everything from black holes to how your computer's microchips work.
They work beautifully for almost everything else.
Yeah, exactly. But our sources hit this hard right out of the gate. Classical physics has fundamentally failed to explain the microscopic mechanism of time. How is that even possible?
Well, it's the elephant in the room of modern physics, and it has been for over a century. Physicists have treated time like an empty stage that events happen upon, rather than a physical actor in the play.
An empty stage.
Right. Let's look at the fundamental equations of classical mechanics, or electromagnetism, or even standard quantum mechanics. If you look closely at the math, they are entirely time reversible.
Meaning the math works perfectly well whether you run the clock forward or backward.
Exactly.
There's no inherent arrow pointing to the future in those baseline equations. Which brings us back to the teacup. If microscopic physics is completely reversible, why does macroscopic reality only move in one direction?
Yeah. This is often called the microscopic reversibility contradiction. And the man who tried to solve this in the late 19th century was Ludwig Boltzmann. He gave us statistical mechanics.
Right, Boltzmann's entropy.
Yes. Boltzmann looked at a gas and said, okay, we can't track every single atom, but we can look at the whole system. He introduced the idea that systems naturally progress from order to disorder simply because there are vastly more ways for a system to be messy than for it to be perfectly organized.
So the shattered teacup has high entropy and a whole teacup has low entropy.
Right.
So Boltzmann essentially says the arrow of time is just the universe naturally drifting toward the most probable state, a giant, chaotic mess.
But the critical flaw, the massive breakdown point that our source material exposes, is that Boltzmann's statistical approach completely lacks a microscopic mechanical explanation for why irreversible heat generation occurs in the first place.
It just kind of assumes it.
It relies entirely on the assumption of initial low entropy conditions. It basically says, well, the Big Bang was highly ordered, so we are just coasting downhill from there. It merely says disorder is mathematically more probable.
But probability isn't a mechanism. That's always driven me crazy. It doesn't give you an actual physical gear system that forces the teacup to shatter and physically prevents it from unshattering.
No, it doesn't at all.
Because at the microscopic level, two Newtonian atoms bouncing off each other are perfectly reversible. So where does the irreversibility actually physically come from? Statistical mechanics essentially just waves its hands and says, look at the odds.
Precisely. And when we look at general relativity, Einstein's masterpiece, it really isn't much better when it comes to explaining the arrow of time. Yeah. Einstein gave us this beautiful four-dimensional manifold spacetime. But in general relativity, time is treated purely as a passive geometric coordinate. It's just a static dimension on a world line.
Hold on, I want to challenge that. Because general relativity literally tells us that massive objects bend time. Time dilates around a black hole. How is that passive?
Well, it bends the geometry of the coordinate system, yes.
Hmm.
Mass traverses this landscape and distorts it. But general relativity does not describe time as an actively generated unidirectional force.
Oh, I see the distinction.
Yeah, in Minkowski space, time is spatialized. It's just the landscape you move through, not the engine driving you forward. And when we jump over to quantum mechanics, the situation is equally frustrating.
Right, because in the Schrödinger equation, time reduces to just a tiny little external parameter, a little t that you plug into the math.
Exactly. It assumes the forward march of time is just a given.
It's like a metronome ticking somewhere outside the universe, rather than deriving time from the fundamental dynamics of the quantum system itself.
So classical physics has been treating time like the physical stage beneath a dancer's feet, a static platform that the universe performs upon.
So, classical physics has been treating time like the physical stage beneath a dancer's feet, but these SDMT papers are suggesting time is actually the friction generated between the dancer's shoes and the floorboards.
That is a phenomenal way to visualize it. Time is not the spatial coordinate, it is the physical consequence of resistance. But to understand this friction, we have to understand the floorboards.
The medium itself.
Right. We have to understand the actual physical medium of the universe that is generating this resistance. And that is where classical physics entirely falls short, because it assumes the vacuum of space is, well, empty.
Which brings us to the core foundation of the SDMT framework. And we should probably define that acronym, superfluid dark matter thixotrope.
Yes.
Our sources modeled the universe not as an empty vacuum, but as a scalar density field of thixotropic superfluid hydrogen. So let's break that down for the listener, because that is a massive mouthful. We're talking about a plenum, right?
Exactly. A space that is entirely full. It acts as a non-Newtonian fluid. Let's focus on the word thixotropic. A thixotropic fluid is one whose viscosity changes under stress.
So think of ketchup or certain kinds of clay.
Yeah, perfect examples. If it sits still, it acts almost like a solid or a highly viscous gel. But when you apply a shear force to it, when you agitate it, it becomes fluid and flows.
Okay, so the universe itself is this deeply responsive, stress-sensitive fluid. But the papers make it clear it's not just a uniform, featureless soup.
Not at all.
Within this superfluid plenum exists a highly specific, discrete fractal geometry. The blueprints refer to it as the 39-cubed Golden Cross network.
And this is where the topology becomes incredibly strict. The 39-cubed lattice means there are 39 graduations or discrete steps per axis in this fractal structure.
So imagine a microscopic three-dimensional grid, but instead of simple intersections, at every local point within this fluid, there is a triple cross structure.
Right. And to understand how time is actually born from this structure, we have to look at how these tiny crosses are oriented. Each local cross in this grid has an internal phase angle, which the math denotes as theta.
The Greek letter theta.
Yes. This angle dictates its orientation relative to the surrounding superfluid medium.
Am I picturing that right? Like a little geometric weather vane spinning in the fluid?
That's a really good analogy. And here is where the SDMT framework introduces the most critical constant in its entire architecture. They call it the striction angle, denoted as phi sub c.
Phi sub c, okay.
And the specific value of this angle is exactly 55.17 degrees.
The golden slope.
The golden slope. The mathematical proofs in the primary blueprint show that this angle, 55.17 degrees, is a state of perfect, absolute equilibrium.
So when it's at that angle, everything is calm.
Exactly. When that local phase angle, your little weather vane theta, aligns perfectly with the striction angle, the thixotropic shear in the surrounding superfluid is mathematically zero. Energy is entirely minimized.
It's totally at rest.
Yes. The universe, down to its most fundamental fluid mechanics, mathematically wants to rest at this exact angle.
Okay, so let me make sure I'm tracking the implications of this. If theta equals 55.17 degrees, there is zero tension. The fluid is perfectly at peace with the fractal geometry.
Right.
But wait, if the universe actually achieved this perfect alignment, does that mean the friction disappears? Does that mean time itself would simply stop existing?
It absolutely does. And what's fascinating here is that the framework actually embraces that. If perfect alignment were universally achieved, the mechanical engine of time would instantly halt.
Wow.
There would be no friction, no torsion, no thermodynamic arrow. The universe would be timeless.
Yeah.
But as the source material dictates, perfect alignment is physically impossible.
Because of quantum mechanics, the papers talk about lattice harmonics and quantum fluctuations.
Exactly.
The universe is inherently a restless, jittery place. These fluctuations constantly jostle the system, meaning they constantly bump the local structure out of that perfect 55.17-degree alignment.
They create a persistent local deviation. Mathematically, it's expressed very simply as delta theta. It's just the difference between where the angle is and where it wants to be at 55.17 degrees.
The gap between reality and perfection.
Exactly. That microscopic gap, that delta theta, is the literal physical birthplace of time.
That is just, it's wild. So basically, the entire universe is like me trying to perfectly level a picture frame on the wall, constantly overcorrecting, and the heat generated from my frustration is the forward march of time.
Well, that's a highly anthropomorphized way to look at it, but mechanically,
Yes.
because the universe is constantly jostled out of perfect alignment, the superfluid lattice violently tries to snap back.
And this attempted realignment creates the mechanical engine of time. In the papers, they call it the restoring torque.
Right, because any deviation from the golden slope generates a mechanical force trying to fix the error. The blueprint represents this restoring torque with the Greek letter tau, and they give a very elegant equation for it.
The restoring torque equation is a foundational piece of this architecture. It states that torque equals negative kappa times delta theta.
And the negative sign just means it's a restoring force that always pulls back toward the center.
But let's talk about kappa. They call it the plenum rigidity. This isn't just an arbitrary number, is it?
Not at all. Kappa is a constant derived from the universal curvature of a Mobius strip, which is baked deeply into the topology of this entire framework.
So it's heavily geometric.
Completely. This rigidity constant determines exactly how aggressively the superfluid resists being misaligned. It is the literal tension of the universe's spring.
Okay, but a spring just snapping back is too simple. The French paper in our stack, the one titled Flèche du Temps, or Arrow of Time, hands us what they boldly call the master equation of emergent time.
Oh, this equation is incredible.
It's an equation for a damped torsional oscillator coupled to a fractal index. And I want to translate this math for you listening, because looking at the differential equation on the page, it is essentially the source code for why yesterday is fundamentally different from tomorrow.
It is a beautifully constructed differential equation. But rather than reading the calculus symbol by symbol, let's break down the four physical realities it represents. It's a spatial balance sheet.
Right. So on the far left side of the equation, the first thing we have is the second derivative of the angle. In plain English, that is system inertia.
Yes. It represents the physical resistance of the plenum volume to changes in its rotational acceleration.
Like physical mass.
Basically,
Yeah.
the universe has a physical weight, a mass equivalent to its rotational phase. When it gets twisted out of alignment, it can't just effortlessly and instantly snap back. It has momentum.
Here's where it gets really interesting. It's exactly like pulling back a heavy, twisted rubber band. It wants to snap back toward the perfect center line, but because of its own system inertia, its own bulk, it can't just elegantly stop at perfect equilibrium. It overshoots. Exactly. It overshoots the 55.17 degree mark, gets pulled back the other way, and swings back and forth.
Precisely. Now, if the universe were just a frictionless vacuum, like classical physics assumes, this rubber band would swing back and forth forever without losing a drop of energy. It would be a perpetual motion machine of pure geometry.
But it's not an empty vacuum.
Right. Remember, the SDMT framework operates in a thixotropic superfluid. That brings us to the second term in the master equation, the temporal friction.
This is the damping term, represented by the Greek letter gamma. We are going to spend a lot of time on gamma very shortly because it is the absolute star of the show.
It really is.
But essentially, this term represents the thixotropic fluid bleeding energy away from the oscillation. It acts as a severe resistance that scales with how fast the angle is twisting.
Then we have the third term on the left side, which is the restoring force we just discussed. This is the geometric spring, driven by that plenum rigidity kappa, which is constantly, relentlessly pulling the system back toward the golden angle of 55.17 degrees.
So we have the inertia causing it to swing, the spring pulling it back, and the friction slowing it down.
Yes.
If it were just those three terms, the rubber band would eventually inevitably settle down to a complete stop due to the friction. Time would die.
But it doesn't.
Right, because there is a final piece on the right side of the equation.
Exactly.
External torque.
Yes, the external torque term prevents the system from ever reaching a standstill. It acts like a persistent cosmic poke. It is a driving force that originates from what the papers call the magnitude index potential.
Does somebody try to synthesize this totally mental picture for the listener? The universe is not statically expanding in the way classical cosmology pictures a balloon inflating in an empty void.
No, not at all.
According to SDMT, the fundamental fabric of reality is perpetually twisting back and forth, vibrating on a microscopic scale, desperately trying to resolve this geometric tension and find that perfect 55.17-degree rest state.
Exactly.
But it is constantly overshooting due to its own inertia. It's constantly having its energy drained by the fluid friction, and it's constantly being re-agitated and poked by external topological torque.
That is exactly the dynamic.
Yeah.
Reality is a frustrated, vibrating, damped oscillator.
Okay, I love the visual. But hold on, let me play devil's advocate here.
Right.
A vibrating rubber band, even a perpetual one that gets poked forever, just twists left and right. It jiggles in place.
Right.
A jiggle doesn't explain the forward progression of time as we actually experience it. I mean, I age, galaxies drift apart. How do we get the forward march of the arrow of time from a back and forth microscopic jiggle?
That is the pivotal question. And to get there, we must transition from the concept of rotation to the concept of scale. We have to link this twisting motion to physical expansion.
Which takes us right into the jitterbug mechanism and the magnitude drift. And this is where the geometry gets almost dizzying.
It does, but it's incredibly elegant once you see it. The SDMT blueprint introduces a new variable, the magnitude index, denoted as K. Think of K as the physical scale of the universe, or what the papers beautifully title the axis of creation.
The axis of creation. I like that.
Remember earlier we talked about the 39-cubed lattice?
Right, the 39 graduations or discrete steps per axis in the fractal structure.
Exactly. So as the index K increases, we are moving up in scale, up in magnitude, graduation by graduation. And the absolute genius of this mathematical framework is how it couples the twisting angle theta to the scale index K. The papers call it the Klein coupling.
Because in this specific topology, you literally cannot separate the two. The geometry of the network dictates a strict physical interlocking between rotation and scale.
You cannot rotate without scaling.
And you cannot scale without rotating. They are physically the same action viewed from different dimensions.
A perfect example is what Buckminster Fuller famously called the jitterbug motion in vector geometry. If you take a specific geometric structure and twist it, it physically expands or contracts.
Just from the twisting.
Right. In the SDMP math, a complete internal phase turn of 90 degrees a quarter turn forces a literal jump in magnitude. The math dictates that a 90-degree turn yields a magnitude change of exactly one step. The index K goes up by 1.
So the mathematical gear ratio is locked in iron. The twisting rotation inherently drives the magnitude scale.
Yes, and this movement along the scale is governed by a potential well. The framework introduces an equation for this potential that utilizes another fundamental constant, the propellant of scale, denoted as beta.
Wait, the papers say the value of beta is the square root of 137, is that right?
That is correct. Beta equals the square root of 137.
Okay, for anyone listening with a background in quantum electrodynamics, the number 137 should be making the hair on the back of your neck stand up. That's the inverse of the fine structure constant. It's the incredibly specific, mysterious number that governs the strength of electromagnetic interactions in quantum mechanics. Feynman famously called it one of the greatest damn mysteries of physics.
You did.
And here it is, popping out of a purely topological framework, dictating the energy required to shift magnitudes in a fractal lattice.
It is not a coincidence. In SDMT, the fine structure constant is a topological necessity.
Yeah.
The mathematics show that the geometric force acting on this scale, which acts like a kind of topological gravity, is constantly pulling the system down the potential well toward the center.
Down toward what they call the center.
Right. In this specific 39-step framework, the deepest part of the well, the absolute center, is at a magnitude index K equals 19. They refer to it as the one.
So the universe desperately wants to fall to the bottom of this well, to rest at scale K equals 19, with a perfect angle of 55.17 degrees.
Yes. But as we established, it can't ever reach perfect rest. Because of that external torque we mentioned in the master equation, the cosmic poke that periodically reactivates the jitterbug mechanism, the twisting speed never truly reaches zero.
The damped oscillation is perpetually sustained.
And here is the grand payoff. Because the twisting speed never reaches zero, its launch partner, the magnitude drift, is mathematically forced to be non-zero on average. The strict gear ratio converts those damped back-and-forth torsion swings into a continuous secular upward drift in scale.
Wait, so time isn't a clock ticking in the background? The forward movement of time is literally the universe shifting mechanical gears and ratcheting itself up in physical scale, discrete step by discrete step.
Yes.
We experience time passing simply because the universe is physically expanding its fractal magnitude to deal with the torsion.
Precisely. This steady upward drift of the index k, from lower magnitudes to higher magnitudes, is the arrow of time. The physical expansion of scale, driven purely by microscopic rotational torsion, is what we consciously experience as the passage of time.
That is staggeringly beautiful. It replaces an abstract dimension with a physical gear system. But I have to stop you again, because we still have to resolve the biggest, ugliest headache of classical physics: thermodynamics.
Yes, entropy.
Exactly, because if time is just a geometric gear shifting up in magnitude, where does the heat come from? Why does the teacup shatter? Why do engines get hot? Why do we decay? We have to look at the exhaust pipe of this gear system.
And that requires us to return to gamma, the temporal friction constant from our master equation. The SDMT consortium calculates this fundamental invariant to be precisely gamma equals 0.172. This specific number is the master key to all of thermodynamics.
Okay, break this down for me. As the blueprint shows, when the universe deviates from perfect alignment, it creates shear stress in the thixotropic superfluid.
Right.
But how does geometric stress turn into the heat that, melts an ice cube?
Think about what friction physically is in our macroscopic world. Friction converts mechanical stress like rubbing your hands together into thermal energy. In this microscopic topology, the temporal friction gamma converts the mechanical torsional stress of the lattice into high-frequency vibrational modes in the superfluid.
High-frequency modes, which is literally the definition of heat.
Exactly. This is the exact mechanical microscopic origin of thermodynamic entropy. The second law of thermodynamics, the absolute rule that entropy always increases in a closed system, is no longer just a statistical assumption based on Boltzmann's probabilities.
Right.
It is a direct physical mechanical output of the constant gamma equals 0.172 rubbing against the thixotropic superfluid plenum.
Oh my God. So the disorder that physicists have been obsessing over, the inevitable death of the universe that has fueled so much existential dread since the 1850s, it's just the thermal exhaust generated by the universe physically grinding against its own geometric architecture.
Yes. If we connect this to the bigger picture, it changes everything. The French document, La machine à torsion auto-entretenue, explicitly calls it a revelation. It proves that the second law is merely a consequence of friction on the torsion pendulum of reality.
The fuzzy physics of statistical mechanics has just been forcefully transformed into rigorous fluid mechanics.
And crucially, this friction is what breaks the symmetry of time. In classical equations, time is totally symmetric. But when you introduce this gamma friction term, the math changes.
Oh, so?
The damping term physically changes sign upon mathematical reversal. It prohibits time from flowing backward without adding massive amounts of external energy to overcome that friction. You can't unrub your hands to freeze them.
Exactly. And the implications scale up astronomically. At the cosmic scale, this secular drift of the magnitude index physically expands the scale factor of the universe. But the presence of this thixotropic friction term actually introduces an effective acceleration into the Friedmann equations, which govern cosmology.
Wait, hold on. An effective acceleration term driving the expansion of the universe apart? Are you talking about dark energy?
Yes. The SDMT framework explains dark energy not as some mysterious, invisible, undetectable substance filling the void, but simply as residual torsion. It is the macro-level consequence of this microscopic friction engine.
That makes so much sense.
Right. The constants we've discussed, the propellant beta equals the square root of 137, the friction gamma equals L 0.172, and the golden slope phi A equals 55.17 degrees, are derived purely from the timeless topology of the 39 cubed fractal network. They do not change over time.
Rather, the entire phenomenon we call time is merely their physical consequence.
That is just, it's a complete paradigm rewrite. But before we accept this as the grand unified answer, the source material throws a massive curveball. The glaring paradox.
Oh, the antimatter paradox.
Yes. If we have definitively established that time only flows forward due to this unavoidable friction and gear shifting, we have to address fundamental particles. Specifically, we have to talk about antimatter.
This is a brilliant stress test of the theory. This raises an important question.
Because in fundamental physics, specifically the CPT theorem charge, parity, and time reversal symmetry antimatter is often treated mathematically as regular matter moving backward in time. Richard Feynman famously utilized this idea.
He did.
So if time is an irreversible friction engine, how can antimatter exist?
The document titled The Friction of Time tackles this head-on. It asks the critical question, how can time be both a reversible symmetry, the T operator in the CPT theorem, and an irreversible drift governed by a damped oscillator?
Right. How do you reconcile a reversible particle with an irreversible universe? The SDMT framework resolves this by proving that time actually has a dual nature.
Let's pull this apart.
First, there is what they call kinematic or topological time. This is the realm of the T operator. It purely reverses the geometry of the movement.
Imagine a vortex spinning in the superfluid plenum. The T operator allows that vortex to spin in the exact opposite direction. Geometrically, the angular velocity flips from positive to negative.
It physically moves backward along the local golden spiral.
Exactly. This exact geometric reversal is how antimatter behaves at the microscopic level. The 39-cube network perfectly permits this backward flow.
Okay, so geometrically speaking, antimatter is moving backward along its local track. That respects quantum mechanics. But here is the mathematical punchline that solves the entire paradox. What happens to the thermodynamic arrow?
The entropy generation.
Right. We just established that the equation for entropy generation is proportional to the friction gamma times the angular velocity squared.
And there is the magic. Because the angular velocity is mathematically squared in the entropy equation, the negative sign of the reverse geometry becomes entirely irrelevant. The math yields a strictly positive result.
Because a negative number squared is positive.
Yes.
So you can force the geometric vortex to spin backwards, like trying to swim upstream against a raging cosmic river. You are technically facing the other way, moving against the current.
Right.
But the physical friction of the water aggressively rubbing against you still generates heat, and you still tire out. You can reverse your geometric direction on the map, but you cannot escape the physical friction of reality.
That is a perfect analogy. Even if an antiparticle completely reverses its geometric flow, it cannot reverse the thixotropic friction of the fluid. Viscosity forces the antiparticle to generate heat and age into the thermodynamic future, exactly like regular matter.
The topological paradox dissolves entirely.
It does. The operator T can reverse the geometry of movement, but nothing can reverse friction.
It's so elegant. The microscopic symmetry of quantum mechanics is fully respected, but the macroscopic viscosity of the fluid breaks the symmetry and enforces the arrow of time. It marries the two conflicting realms of physics beautifully.
It really does.
Okay, we've proved this mechanism on a cosmic scale, dealing with dark energy. We've proved it on a subatomic scale, dealing with antimatter. But now we must bring this down to the ultimate scale for the listener, the human scale.
Oh, biology.
We have to talk about biology, consciousness, and what this physics implies about the concept of death.
This takes us into the most conceptually radical document in our stack, a paper titled Fractal Reincarnation.pdf, authored by the Cerebrum Collaboration. They take the hardcore SDMT physics we just outlined and rigorously apply it to the biological state.
They model organic life not just as a bag of chemical reactions, but as a non-equilibrium steady state. A nessus.
Right.
In this topological framework, a biological entity is essentially a highly complex transducive sensor that is intentionally maintaining a persistent internal phase shift. It is actively holding itself away from the golden angle.
Yes, they term this the vital misalignment. It's defined mathematically as the biological delta theta being distinctly non-zero. As long as you are alive, your entire biological structure is maintaining a profound tension against the 55.16-degree equilibrium of the universe.
And because you are successfully maintaining this tension, you are constantly generating local irreversible entropy.
You are literally burning time to stay alive.
Yeah.
The friction generated by your misalignment is your biological clock. You are a localized torsion engine.
But then the document outlines what happens when that engine fails. It outlines topological death.
Death, modeled in this topological framework, is completely reframed. It is not the dissipation of information into a dark nothingness. It is defined precisely and mathematically as the relaxation of geometric tension.
the tension just releases.
Right. It is the moment the biological delta theta finally approaches zero. The biological system gives up the exhaustive fight against the fluid and finally aligns with the golden slope.
The document gets incredibly specific about the mechanics of this. It specifies that the electromechanical coupling with the low-magnitude network collapses. It specifically points to the transducer of magnitude index, K equals 12.
And K equals 12 in this lattice architecture corresponds to water.
Which is astounding considering biology is predominantly water. When that specific K equals 12 aqueous coupling fails, the external torque we talked about earlier zeroes out. The physical body stops generating time.
And this collapse triggers an event that the lead architect of the paper calls the molt of the Ouroboros.
The snake eating its own tail.
Right. The Ouroboros is the ancient mythological symbol of the eternal cycle of life, death, and rebirth. In the SDMT framework, the physical body, the K equals 12 water-based membrane, is simply discarded. It relaxes.
But the core topological information, what happens to that?
The paper refers to this core information as the soliton of consciousness. A soliton is a self-reinforcing wave packet that maintains its shape while it propagates. This soliton exists at a much higher fractal graduation index, K equals 39.
So it's operating on a different magnitude entirely.
Exactly. And because a fundamental rule of this fluid dynamics is that topological information cannot be destroyed. It is conserved within the plenum. This soliton of consciousness is violently ejected when the biological tension relaxes.
It is forced into a phase transition, and the geometry of how it escapes is just mind-bending.
The mathematics dictate that it undergoes a half-turn on the universal Nubius strip. In the language of the lattice, that is equivalent to 2 successive 90-degree jitterbug rotations.
Wait, 2 90-degree turns?
Yes. And during this massive double rotation, it is propelled by our scale constant beta the square root of 137 to an entirely new magnitude coordinate.
It abandons its restrictive physical skin, its K equals 12 water suit, to deploy completely intact at another graduation of the 39 cubed network. It is literally ratcheted up the scale of reality by the very gear system of time we've been discussing for the last hour.
But here is where you must make a crucial distinction between a flat circle and a spiral. The classic mythological Ouroboros is a flat circle of eternal return. The idea that you live, you die, and you come back exactly the same, endlessly repeating the loop.
But in the SDMT universe, because of the ubiquitous, unavoidable temporal friction that gamma equals 0.172 constants import, this soliton of consciousness structurally cannot return to the exact same starting point.
Right. The friction prevents a perfect loop. He can never go exactly back to where you were because the universe has ground forward.
Exactly. The exhaust of your own life has changed the landscape. So instead of a flat circle, the soliton rises in a spiral across magnitudes.
Every cycle of life, tension, death, and relaxation mathematically elevates the topological consciousness up the magnitude index.
The macro-level friction breaks the symmetry of the eternal return, giving biological evolution a profound directional and physical meaning. It is an ascension mechanism.
So what does this all mean? The Cerebrum collaboration paper ends its analysis by exploring a highly speculative but mathematically grounded concept they call fractal medicine.
Right. They aren't just presenting a theory of physics, they're suggesting a future applied science.
They hypothesize that if an entity, a conscious human, can intentionally align its internal biological angle closer to the golden slope of 55.17 degrees harmonically.
Like through highly specific frequencies, biofeedback, or topological geometric alignment.
Exactly. If they can do that, they can actively reduce the ambient friction.
By voluntarily reducing the misalignment gap, you decrease the friction term in the entropy equation. You literally reduce the destructive wear and tear on your biological K equals 12 transducer. You slow down your own localized experience of time.
And theoretically, if you can master that alignment, it means you could consciously steer this topological phase transition. It reframes death.
It makes death not a terrifying, chaotic biological extinction event, but a piloted quantum jump. You choose the geometry of the molt.
It completely replaces the mechanical fatalism of standard biology. You are no longer just a passive victim being dragged along the dry riverbed by the arrow of time. You become an active participant navigating the universal jitterbug.
You participate in your own scalar elevation. Wow. Okay, we have covered an immense, staggering amount of ground today. We took classical physics, we found its deepest flaws, and we completely disassembled the concept of time.
We tore it down from being a passive, invisible background dimension, a silent river, and we rebuilt it as an active, violent, frictional gear system.
We explored the incredible architecture of the 39-cubed superfluid network. We defined the golden slope of perfect rest at 55.17 degrees. We examined the quantum jostling that forces the universe out of alignment, creating the restoring torque that drives reality.
We connected the deepest, weirdest mathematical constants of reality, the fine-structured propellant of scale, and the 0.172 friction engine to the macroscopic realities we experience every day, like thermodynamic entropy, the shattering of a teacup, and even the cosmic expansion of dark energy.
We successfully resolved the topological paradox of antimatter, moving backward in time without breaking the thermodynamic arrow.
And finally, we followed that rigorous physics all the way up the magnitude scale to the biological mu, the molt of human consciousness jumping across fractal magnitudes, propelled by the very friction of existence.
For those of you listening, our brilliant expert audience, thank you. Thank you for bringing your curiosity and trusting us as guides through this profoundly dense, mathematically intimidating theoretical framework.
It is not easy to unthink the classical world you were raised in, but the SDMT blueprints offer a mechanically rigorous, mathematically stunning alternative to everything we thought we knew.
It is a framework that successfully unifies quantum mechanics, macroscopic thermodynamics, cosmology, and even the persistence of consciousness under a single, elegant law of topological torsion. Before we sign off, I want to leave you with a final concept to mull over.
Something we haven't explicitly stated, but which naturally emerges from the shadow of everything we've discussed today.
We've defined the forward passage of time as nothing more than the thermal exhaust of the universe desperately trying and failing to achieve a perfect 55.17-degree geometric alignment. We burn time, we age, and we decay strictly by being misaligned.
But if that is mechanically true, then perhaps the concept of eternity isn't an infinite, unending amount of time.
Perhaps eternity is simply the localized achievement of zero shear geometric perfection. It is a state where you finally perfectly align with the golden slope.
The friction drops to absolute zero, the entropy stops, and the engine of time simply stops being generated around you.
You aren't floating down the river forever. You finally figured out how to step out of the riverbed entirely.